Good evening, John.
Hello.
Thank you for agreeing to come along this evening, this morning, this afternoon, tonight, wherever you are in the world, and to talk about your model buildings on your layout, Hope Street. I hope everybody's had the opportunity to look at the video that was featured in the virtual show, but we'll also send out a link to everybody with the invitation to the layout, to the meeting tonight. So when you're ready, John, I will share the screen.
Yeah.
And if it works, that will be really good. Now, is anybody seeing that screen? Are you seeing it, John?
I'm seeing it, yes.
Yeah, it looks fine to me.
That means everybody must be seeing it.
Yeah.
Okay, then, so we'll start off with your first picture.
Yeah.
Away you go.
Right. Well, this is basically just a picture of the layout in its total length. You can see there's basically a small goods yard at the front and the row of houses to the back, and there's some sort of industrial area and the coal drops to the far left. It's just so you get an idea of how the layout looks. So when I start talking about it and where the buildings fit, you'll have a bit more idea, basically. But here's hoping I'm not going to teach you how to suck eggs. So if I do, tell me and I'll stop. But yeah, that'll do for a start.
Thank you. Have we got a new picture come up yet?
Yes. We have, but I was going to ask for that later.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I just wanted to give an introduction with the layout, and then I'll got the introduction with various issues relating to it, and before we get onto the buildings in particular, if that's okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Well, do you want to put me back on, or do you want? Because I want to show people things, if that's all right.
Of course. There you are.
Right. I suppose the first thing is the sort of a general philosophy in relation to building a layout. I like the idea of actually placing the layout in an area that's recognizable, which is what I've tried to do with Hope Street. And the buildings are largely from the Newcastle Gateshead area, although there's a few from other areas in the northeast particularly. But having said that, anybody under 100 years old is unlikely to recognize that as Newcastle or Gateshead. So, but I still like the idea that a place should reflect, a railway should reflect where it is, rather than just being a station, which, all right, as far as I'm concerned, and most of you are concerned, you can look at a station and have a pretty good idea where it is, but your average punter coming to an exhibition, it doesn't mean a lot. So if you can actually make it something that looks like something they know, I personally feel it's a good idea. And I suppose that's a simple introduction to doing research for such things. The first thing I can say is that finding books that tell you about buildings is, other than how to build them in ridiculously detailed and not much pictures, is very difficult. I've actually found this one, which is Lost England, and I got this in Smith's. It's published by Historic England, and they do two in paperback at, I think they're £8 each. The other one's Lost London, and they've got some lovely, also a range of lovely photos, and an especially good book for anybody who wants to model London up to, say, 1939, 40-ish, is this one. This has it's basically old London buildings, some of which still exist. But I mean, can you imagine just coming up and looking at a building, get the picture there, like that? You know, I mean, that's, you've got a lovely, interesting building. It's just these two little houses, but it's going to create something that's far more memorable than just a general purpose terraced house. The other thing about this book in particular is it gives lots of sections of floor plans. So when you come in to plan your buildings, there is lots of it basically gives you sizes, which are very useful because old buildings are not the same as modern ones. But having got over those two books, the easiest thing to do is go on the internet. There's lots of photos available. I used the Newcastle City Library site for the Newcastle buildings, and that was very useful. But if you can go onto Flickr and various other places, you'll find lots and lots of very useful photos. In fact, I ended up with a big file full of them to help you with the buildings. Once you've decided what buildings you want to build, then the materials. The ones on Hope Street are largely made with cardboard cores, foam board sides, and then a coating depending on what the building is. Mostly, a lot of it is plasticard stuck onto the card. Things like windows, these are actually Grantline windows, which I got on eBay. eBay is always worth a look because they have all sorts of odds and ends turning up. You can also get, I think these are Intentio, or they might be L-cut. They sell them separately as windows and doors and bits and pieces. You can buy them in bits. And not to forget, York Model Railway do some lovely sash windows, which come in 3 parts and make up into a very nice sash window. Not particularly cheap, but they're well worth it. Doors I tend to make myself out of card. Other things to look for, again from York Model Railway, are things like dog's toothing, nice strip of brick. And if you overlay them, you can actually get some very nice effects. Other materials. Regitex. That's actually it says Pantiles on the thing. It's actually sets, which you can do those, and I'll tell you how I did the ones on the layout. But this is they're a nice, easy way to do if you just got a small amount of sets, and an absolute godsend are Pantiles. They're almost impossible to model effectively with that, from scratch. So, but Regitex do a very nice set of those. The only trouble I found with Regitex is actually finding where to buy them. I think these came from DCC Supplies, but they tend to be a bit hit and miss as to when they're in stock. So it's worth getting, if you want to use them, get some in stock in good time. They also do a brick, which you can probably see there, which personally I don't like very much. I don't think it's very good. I think using plasticard bricks are a lot easier and actually have a better effect. So any questions on materials? It's fairly straightforward stuff. I have got some extra that I'll tell you about in the end, but they're not related to this, to the Hope Street project. Right. Tools. I suppose the critical tools, the most important ones are those. A good ruler and a scalpel. I tend to use a Swan Morton scalpel and buy 10A blades by the box. It's cheaper. You get through quite a lot. It's surprising how quickly card blunts blades. The other thing I find very useful is a scale ruler. So, right, and then you come on to the more, well, actually, there's a set of, that's obviously a combination square. I've had it for about 30 years, and I use that for cutting up big sheets of card. I tend to buy the card in, I think it's A2 size sheets. It's sort of mounting board people use for picture frame mounts. And you buy it for, it's about £5 a sheet, and it's about 1 millimeter thick and very good quality card. And then a small one, which is much more useful for your actual working on the model. And if you're feeling flush, because they're not very cheap, a middle size one. Right, then other tools. Obviously things like a pair of dividers, or even a tiny pair. That's a pair I got bought a set of drawing tools, and that came with them, and they're very handy, but probably a little bit more difficult to source than a standard engineering pair, but very useful. A bin vise and drills, because if you're drilling into card, well, I was going to say, don't try to punch through card unless you've got a proper punch drill. It makes a much nicer hole. You can push the card and it split, and it doesn't do a very nice job. Basically, a drill's a lot better. Right,
John. Tim Bryant is asking. He's never sure when to use foam board and when to use card for the walls. Have you got any advice?
Yes, I tend to. I'll show you one I've done earlier. Use card for the front of the building. That's basic. That's just a very basic two-room building, and I'd use the mounting board for that because it's relatively thin, quite strong, and it's easier to. When you're cutting it, trying to cut through a millimetre is a lot easier than trying to cut through 3 to 5 millimeters of foam board. Your blade wobbles, so you can get a much cleaner, sharper line on the card. So I tend to use that for anything where we've got holes in it. I'll use the board, and then the foam board tends to use for side walls, internal partitions, anything like that.
Just to clarify then, John, the cardboard that you're using, is that like picture mounting board?
Yes, it is. It's picture mounting board.
So you get it at art suppliers?
Art suppliers, anywhere like that, yeah.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, that's no problem. Right, other tools I've got. There's a couple. It's an interesting little tool. It's actually for putting super glue on. I picked this up on YouTube video for making model tanks. And if you want to put a tiny amount of super glue on, it's very useful for doing that. It's basically a darning needle with the top end filed off or ground off, and then put into a bit of brass tube and a bit of stuff to make it easy to handle.
Can you just lift it up a bit, John, so people can see it for a moment?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Simple. The only thing to watch, well, there's two things to watch with it. One is when you try to grind the top off the pin, the needle, sometimes they're a bit brittle and the whole lot flies apart. So you've got to put eye protectors on. But if you find a needle that files down nicely, they're fine. The other thing is, once it gets clogged up with glue, the easiest way to clean it is with a cheap cigarette lighter and set fire to it. But hold it well away from your face because it gives off a tiny amount of cyanide. As a health warning.
Somebody's just put on that the range is very good for supplies of good quality cardboard.
It is. You can get lots of different colours, and well, yeah, obviously because picture framers use a lot of different colours. So yes, it is. Most crafts and art shops sell it, so it's easy to get.
Thank you.
Right, a couple of more specialist tools is that, which is actually basically a little compass. From I think it's Offer make them. Not essential, but quite nice to have if you're doing a lot of buildings. And if you're working with plasticard, a scrawker again from Offer, quite a useful tool. If you want to score plasticard, it's you can get nice straight lines with that.
You said Offer, is that OLFA?
Where's it gone? OLFA, yes.
Thank you.
Japanese. Right, now we come to the more interesting thing. Well, one more thing before we go on. An essential tool is a protractor. Nice cheap one, I think a £1 from Smith's. Whatever you do, don't get one with a hollowed out middle, because as soon as you put it onto something, you'll find you're working into this area of the compass, and if it's hollowed out, you can't see the line, and it becomes awkward. But get a solid one like that, just cheap plastic protractor. They're incredibly useful for getting straight lines on anything. I mean, the obvious thing is, that sort of thing. Just Nice and simple, but it's a basic tool, very cheap, but well worth it. The other thing,
Rob Collins says you can get Alpha cutters on eBay.
yes,
simply listed for fitting car windows.
Oh, right.
I didn't know that.
No,
I've had mine for a lot of years.
yeah. There's another tool, which is probably less well known, less common, is a glass cutter, an oil-filled one. It's basically the sort of glass cutter that, well, some professionals and certainly art people would use. I think they're about, well, you can buy them for $18.50 from Warm Glass, and that comes with free oil, with oil as well. So the only thing the only thing you need to really make it work is a little board. Just a simple piece of wood that done on square. Measure whatever you want to cut, put a line on it. Make sure your glass is clean. Place it on the board. Take in this case, a little piece of, find where the camera is, a piece of wood. Put that on, use that as a rule. And this is where it all goes wrong. And it's not brilliant, but that's, and you can cut quite small pieces of glass for making windows. I like glass because, unlike acetate, if it smokes up with super glue, you can clean it off with a fiberglass brush. You can scrape paint off it. When you're finished, you can even polish it with a bit of ibuprofen, a bit of alcohol, and it's nice and clear. You don't, and it doesn't. That's it. You can't, unlike acetate, which you can damage. It's much more difficult to damage. I tend to use it for all windows where possible. I also use it for coaches as well. The source of glass is mainly microslides. These got on eBay. They're about 1 millimeter thick, and they're very easy to cut. You can also get, although they're getting rather scarce now, is slides for presentation slides. If you get, but make sure you don't do what I did and buy a packet of glassless ones. Got it out, found I spent £13 on a load of plastic frames I didn't want, because basically you take the glass out of the plastic frame. But they've got a frame, and again, the only trouble with this is thinner and then can be more useful. But it is a little bit, the thinner the glass, the harder it is to cut. But it's well worth experimenting with for the sake of a few pound. And I say the main thing is having a board, so you've got a nice flat surface. I tend to then measure it and draw lines on the board to the size of that I'm going to. Obviously, if you get too many lines, you can throw the board away and make another one. It's just it's a scrap wood, really. And I say for 18 quid for that, and probably well, they vary in price, but a 5 to a tenner for a box of slides. You can get.
Where do you get those from?
They came from eBay. You can, I think, still get them new, but they're quite common on eBay. They get different manufacturers, but they're all the same. Usually come in boxes of 100 for microscope slides. And they're quite high quality because they're built for scientific purposes, you know, for use on a microscope, or they were made for that, should I say.
Yeah, I've just searched them on eBay. They're about anything from £5.45 upwards.
Yes, they vary. People ask a lot of money sometimes, but just look and see what's available and find some that look like good value. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, can we have the next photo, please, Tony?
Yes, if you just bear with me. Rob Pullums advised me on how to do this a little better.
Right. The next one.
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
Right.
The F5 function's not working, so.
Tony,
Yes.
if you hit on the bottom of the screen, there should be a thing which looks, that's it, you've done it. Well done.
And we got there in the end.
Yeah.
It's just my slow computer.
Yeah. Before I start on the buildings, it's just a thing to mention. If you look behind the goods shed, there's a big wall, and behind the big wall is an extension of buildings. That's just because that is basically the end board of the layout. And when I put the wall there, I thought it all looked a bit blank, you know. So and I had some old Pico back scenes, so I chopped them about and used bits of them to just put a line of tops of buildings across the back, just as a little addition.
Is that what I'm highlighting there?
It is. That's it. Yeah. What else we got in the, well, also if you look at the goods shed is actually one based on the one at Pocklington. The front bit that you've got the arrow on, which is timbered or timber cladding.
Oops.
That's oops.
Don't know what happened there.
Nope. Yeah, that's timber, which is some timber cladding that I actually bought in sheets, but I found very difficult to get since. The back part of it is brick, is very truncated. So, but this anyway, that's what that is. If you go to the next photo now, we can that one. Right, this one I particularly want to mention simply because of if you look down the passage, it goes on and on. It's a little trick I picked up on an American thing, I think that's originally, and that's using a mirror to create a passage. Because the building in the middle between the two buildings is actually flat against the end board, so that passage is actually is a reflection of what's you're looking down in the foreground. So, and if we go back back to me.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Stop sharing.
Yeah, that's basically all that is. It's two walls, a mirror, but when you look on it like that, the mirror goes on round the corner, takes it round like you've got a pathway. And you can put that into a building or anywhere really, and it just creates an image. Because obviously if you've got the top on it, just to create a passage, it's a way of extending the layout back a bit in some areas, making it look like it's a bit bigger than it is. Just a little trick. Right. Now if we go to the next photo.
Just before we go there, I'm getting asked, what is the significance of the oil-filled last cutter?
Apparently it helps the actual cutter to glide on. It works better. I don't actually know the detail of that. That's actually a Japanese one. What's it called?
So the oil actually lubricates them.
It is a lubricant. Exactly why it needs the lubricant, I'm not sure, but I do know it's a quality cutter for semi-professionals at very least, and some professionals use on a regular basis. So it's not a gimmick. It does help the cutter work.
Thank you. Sorry for disturbing you there.
No problem.
Yes, you were saying next. You wanted to.
The next picture, please.
We'll get there eventually, I hope.
While that one's still there, notice the yellow pub in the top corner, because I'll be talking about that in a minute.
I'm going to stop sharing and go back and try that again.
Yeah. Actually, Tony, you could stop there for the minute. I can talk on what I've got in front of me now. If you put me back on screen.
Okay. I finally got the one that I wanted.
Right. As I was saying, the building on the top, which is called the Arch, which is, so you can just get some idea of how the building's gone together. I'm personally not happy with the way the ridge tiles are done. I should have cut the dormers in a bit lower, but you can see the Regitex, which is just glued on. Tall chimney because it's up against a wall, so it has to get the draft, so it has to be higher. That is actually just transfers the oh, I can't remember. You can get them again. You can get them on the internet, transfer sheets. My wife actually Shirley did all the artwork, or the words, but that's, and this brickwork around there, that is again, it's strips from York Model Railways, and they do no, similar to the Dogtooth strip, but just single. Well, you can see, we'll get it up close, you can see it just curves it round. It's a bit fiddly to work because they're obviously long strips, but you can actually, with a bit of patience, get them to go into quite interesting shapes. And it is actually modelled on a real pub. So again, you probably can't see properly, but that's actually square guttering, which was actually, for a lot of old buildings, they actually used timber, and they'd actually make it up in planks, basically, nailed together, stuck together, and that would act as guttering.
Mm-hmm. So what did you use to build them?
This, there you go. Card. And that the back which is not screen, is actually foam board, and that bit's for those two bits of foam board, but this one is mainly card because it's all the cutout bits where I've got to. So it is just, you can just see it, just a millimeter card. Bits like that are plastic strip, just to give a decorative edge. That's the timbering, is plastic layers of plastic card, and then thin strips in to give a bead in. Really, just built a lot of it building up with plastic card there, and again, York windows and Grant Line top windows.
It looks very effective with the glass glazing.
Yeah, it does. I think it makes a big difference, and it's a lot easier once you've mastered the art of cutting it. Right, if I'll do this next building as well. This is relatively low relief because it's actually, these buildings are actually for a baseboard joint. So they actually, that's why I've taken them off the layout. They're easy because they are meant to come off, and they cover the joints on the baseboards. This is one at the end of the back, right at the back of the board. So you've got these bits which actually are covered. And again, you can see, which you probably, I think that light will make it better. You can see the decorative brickwork, which again, I say, is the York Model Railway singles, just a row of soldiers, I think they call it. I thought I had one actually, but I don't seem to. No.
Is that York Model Works?
Yeah, it's York Model Railway. Is it York Model Making? Sorry, York Model Making. They do a good range of bits and pieces, but they say they come in straight lines, but you can work them round, and then again, you probably, they're easier to do that way because obviously they are cut as bricks. So, and that's plastic card stuck onto the card. Signs done by my wife, just basically on the computer. And that's the Dogtooth arrangement I was talking about. You can see there, you can see how the Dogtooth which is just two pieces of that laid one on top of the other. You lay it on top and then you have one underneath it to slightly lower down, so you get a step.
Mhm.
And again on the round the chimney top, just to add a bit of interest, but without really much real effort, but it does make the building look a bit more interesting, I think.
You mentioned the bricks are called soldiers. I've just been on the York Metal.
That's it, yeah.
York website, and they call them headers.
Headers, yes. Yeah, different. Yeah, headers or lintels or whatever.
That's
So, yeah, that's
York Model Making.
York Model Making.
That's the name of their firm.
Yeah. Right. Actually, I suppose what I should have done, getting out of sync here, as I showed you earlier, that's how I would start a building. Simple as that. The red bits represent the internal structure. I like to draw the inside floors and the walls. It just helps to give me a feel of how the building should be. Normally, buildings, I leave a fairly big base at the bottom for working with. It makes a life a lot easier. I tend to then, and I'd often get 2 or 3 buildings in a block and build a bit and sit them on a base that then fixes into the layout. But that's a start. That's how it would start. You then apply plasticard, pre-painted. I'm trying to get the light so you can see it.
Mm-hmm. So you paint them first.
I always paint them first. I think it's a lot easier. The other thing I've done with this layout, which is probably not normal, but not absolutely abnormal, I've painted I've used a dark grey mortar. Now, most buildings, until comparatively recently, would have lime mortar. But I did discover, mainly from the house I'm actually in now, that if you actually live in an area where there's a foundry nearby, you get a lot of foundry waste, and that mixes nicely with lime to create a grey mortar. And for the effect I was trying to have for the layout, I thought, well, I'll do on grey. So the lintel on there is from Southwestern Finecast? Something Southeastern Finecast, I think they are, and they do big sheets of lintels. Again, that's part painted now.
Yes.
So it's had its base coat, which I've just cut out. Oh, sorry about this, it's awkward trying to show these things.
What glue do you use for gluing the plasticard onto the card?
Right. This is an awkward. I've tried several things over the years. For a small thing like this, you can actually get away with soaking the card with solvent adhesive, and as long as it gets it soaked enough, but mind you don't get any on the plastic at the front of the plastic, you can press it down and it will stick quite well. And the same goes for the lintel. I have tried double-sided tape, which works reasonably well as long as you don't have it too long in a very hot place, because what happens then, as you can just about see on here, and our club rooms are very hot, it can bulge.
Yes.
I don't ever use Evo stick. I have heard people using Evo stick, but that will damage the plastic sooner or later, however thin you put it on. I've been trying with Yoo-Hoo, which seems to work quite well.
Have you tried alphatic glue?
I've not tried that, not for plastic, no, to be quite honest. It could be worth a try. But I sense that Yoo-Hoo seems to work as well, so without damaging the plastic too much.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so things like that. I've told you, I mentioned that windows, doors, again, I tend to cut those out of, I find it easier to cut them out.
And how do you fix the glass windows in?
Usually super glue.
Super glue.
Yeah, and you do tend to, there is a high risk of getting your super glue on where you don't want it. But as I say, if it's on the glass, you can scrape it off. So it does make it. I mean, I'm trying to find. I haven't got any. I mean, again, you can see on those, the windows there, they've been glued and painted.
I take it you paint the frame first before you apply the glass.
Yes, yes. The windows, the door window openings are cut out, and then, I mean, it depends on depending on the frame. Some of them you can just stick the glass onto the frame and put it in from behind quite easily. Others you have to cut the glass to small sizes, which can be fiddly, but it's doable. Doors, as I say, is there. Actually, so you can see where I've put that out on that one. That's the back of a door, which is quite rough, because and then the front, and that is actually stuck to a piece of acetate. Although you could again stick glass on, or just use a plain back to get a solid door. There. You know, I mean, basically just draw them out on a bit of, this is 2 bits of card, so I've got back and front together, and draw them out and cut them out. I usually find that's a lot cheaper than messing about buying them, because you can, once you get into it, you can do lots easily.
You have a standard size for your doors?
You
have a standard size for your doors?
Well, I tend to work on a 6 foot by 3 foot, mainly because I'm working from photographs, but you can go bigger or smaller depending on the prototype, really. It is a bit of guesswork, because if you're working from a photograph, you haven't got a proper measurement, which is where, as I was saying about the book with the floor plans on, can be quite handy, because it gives you start to get a scale. At least you can work up from there. You've got some measurements to start with. The other thing I've to remember with older buildings, the windows are often a lot higher than modern ones. Mm-hmm. So you might have a 6 foot window, a 6 foot tall window is not uncommon in an old building, unless you get very old buildings. But certainly Victorian buildings will often have 6 foot high windows, even for humble terraced houses. So, right, where are we? Oh, yes, we'll go to that the photo you were about to go on, because it's an interesting one. Yep. Right, this is actually, I can't show you the photograph as well because I've got the building. Is the bottom buildings? I mean, you can see the brick built building. That's a row of standard terraces, and again, they're York Model Railway, York Model Railway model making windows. The beauty of those is for a row of terraces, is you can have them all identical.
Yes.
So you're not, it's a lot easier. I mean, you can make windows, but just especially when you've got a lot, it takes a lot of time and effort, and getting them all identical is difficult. So, but that higgledy-piggledy mess of building with all that did actually exist, and I've got a photograph to prove it. And where's it gone now? That's Elizabeth Morgan that stood down there, and she's talking to Mary Hulbert. They actually recorded the names of the people that lived in the house before they demolished it.
Are you wanting me to stop sharing so you can show something?
No, that's all right, and I'll show you in a second. I was just going to say, because that's what was actually at the bottom of a lane called, well, it's actually Bowl Alley Bank, and it was on Pipewell Gate, which was a notorious slum area in Gateshead, and they were all pulled down in the 20s and 30s. But it was such a fascinating building, I just had to build it. And if you can just see in the corner, I can see the building that I showed you earlier, just at the back of where it's set back. That's on
the left-hand side.
On the left-hand side, you can just see where that building fits in. That line, that drain line, is roughly the baseboard splits. So you can see how I covered it over, basically.
That's a very, very good way of doing it.
Right, if you want to go back to me again. Right, that's the photo of the place in question. It's not, I mean, you can't really, but you can get an idea of
wow, yes.
That's what I would
certainly get the atmosphere of it.
Yeah, so there's just a fascinating picture. I found it actually in an old book. And I just thought, and then I came across it. I got this actual photograph off the internet, but it's a fascinating thing. And I thought that I've got to model it, so I did. Right, what else have we got? Oh, you mentioned.
We're being asked, is the brick building scale depth?
The terrace. The row of
Would you
terraces.
like to unmute to explain?
Yeah, is the it looks narrow, but is that the scale depth of that brick building?
It's feasible. It's actually it's basically a generic terrace, the sort of 2 up, 2 down, or one up, 1 down terrace that were built in the late Victorian period, early Edwardian. The floor plan is tight, but such buildings exist. Well, I live in Otley, and I can think of at least 2 where they virtually come to a wedge-shaped buildings. They're actually narrower than that at the end. And there's one in Baildon as well that I pass on the way to Keighley to go to the club. So yes, such buildings do exist at that sort of narrowness.
Amazing.
Depends whereabouts in the world you're looking, but they are there.
Thank you.
Right. You mentioned laser something. I think it's Tony said something about getting some things laser cut. Most of the buildings are scratch built, except for this one, which is a Petite Models. I'm not sure what it is. I've turned it into a greengrocer's. You can see.
That's super.
That's and it actually I might be able to.
So that's laser cut ply, is it?
Yeah, that's laser cut. Wait, it's MDF, and you can just see they've even put some coloured glazing in with it in the kit. Very nice little kit, quite basic. Apart from that front, and then the front is as the model. I wanted it to be gable end, so I put a gable end on top, and I extended it to a more realistic depth because it was only about 1 inch or so deep. So with again, that's the foam board I've used just to the sides to extend it. There is a light in there, but that's, yeah, obviously it's not connected. And the chimney I made, because the one that came with it wasn't the right size.
What have you used to do the line rendering?
That is actually a spray I got for something else. It's sort of a rough finish. Just a gritty spray, kind of some special paint. I don't think I've got any more, but I mean, you can do that with talcum powder or something fine, anything fine, really, very fine sand. It's anything gritty, just to give it a gritty finish. And the only other thing, and this actually is the only one of this, was one of the signs that's not. That's a Howard Scenic sign. It just happened to fit the hole in across there that was cut out into the laser cut. The figures, I'm not sure where they came from, and the rest of it is, I think, a Langley, the apples and trade stand, and the window display, which can you see? Yes, there's a window display in there, white metal, so yeah. That's that. Oh. Right, what's the next photo?
Have a look.
I know which one it is, yeah.
No, it's not wanting to change. Oh, there it is.
Oh, that's it. Right, these are actually I built that's well the previous section and the previous board were all the buildings were built as a block, and it's the same with those 4. They're actually all one block of building. George Younger actually existed in Alloa, and I think he was a brother of William Younger, which is probably more well known now. But Alloa ale was apparently very popular in the slum areas around. Generally, it was very cheap. You could buy it, compared to most other beers. So it was popular in the rougher areas. If you look on it's the brush makers, you can see a hog. And that is a Warhammer that came out of my son's Warhammer set, and it's just basically a Warhammer wild boar. There was on that top of that dormer, there was a model of a boar, and it actually looked more ridiculous than the one that's there now on the model. The one it was so awful, it would have been almost impossible to model, and no one would have recognized it. It looked like a scruffy cat. Yes, it was a weird thing. So I, rather than trying to model what was actually there, I used a representation. Yeah. You can see there's lighting in the pub. That's just LEDs, a bit of modelling in there. I'll come to that. How much time? Oh, heck, we're running out of time. Right.
I take it this is the baseboard joint on the right.
That's the base. Yes, and there's a bit missing at the bottom. The bit of wall. Here. That should be, yes, there should be a piece of wall on there, a piece of coating. So
we'll pretend we didn't see it.
Yeah, actually, the bit with the line that you just went down, it doesn't actually follow the baseboard joint exactly. That bit lifts out as well. So it's just like there's just a drain down the thing, but the drain runs into the joint near at the bottom.
Very good.
See what I mean? So it looks as if it looks as if it's continuing. The drain's continuing where it's actually where it becomes the baseboard joint. So, right. I was going to say, and there's if you see F book at the end, that's got a Springside meat and vegetable meat things in there. Again, it's got lights, and you can actually see the butcher's wife with a tray of pies that she's putting out. She's just made them. So right, I suppose better do the next photo. That's a close-up of the hog. I rather like this one because that was just a bit of scrap plastic card I found, and I treated it with white paint to give it a whitewash look and talcum powder, and it dirtied up beautifully around the bottom. And those signs, the Preston, the F Collier and Scott and Crow were all genuine. They actually existed. So, and I made a little. Is a little thick thing of a little knot of brooms actually outside the shop in the photograph. So the signs all came from the internet, and they've just been reduced, cut down, and you can actually read them, which was quite amazing when I printed them off. So as you can see there, they've got the M for the theatre signs and various other bits and pieces. So, and you can see the pan tiles to good effect.
Mm-hmm.
If you're actually interested in old buildings, you might notice that they've got the roof has got a funny shape to it. And I suspect that peak is the original gable end of a medieval house or building, and it's been fronted. It would have been making the house probably 300 years old the frontage was probably 100 years old when they pulled it down. So if you're interested in such things. Right, that'll do for that.
You want me to stop sharing? Or
yeah, please, yes, if you will.
And we're back with you.
Yep, that's the cutout of some of the things you can find, again, on the internet, reduce them down. You can get all sorts of notices and billboard and old adverts. Quite handy. The only thing you've got to watch with those is they will fade in the sun depending on your printer. Right. Are we finishing at 9?
No, you can go on to 9:30.
Oh, right. Oh, that's all right. Then I've got to, I won't rush.
What is the pointing in the ridge tiles? Asks John and Christine.
I'm trying to remember now. What did I use? Oh, I'm trying to. I think I used some sort of plastic putty, to be quite honest. Do you mean the white stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's just a plastic putty. You know, got it in a tube and just rubbed it in.
Yeah.
Just rubbed it in with my thumb. Just, you know, just
Yeah.
put it on there and rub it in. And again, along the bottom, just push it up and tidy it up.
It's very effective.
Quite easy.
That's what I like.
Yeah, that's what it's often. These things often are. If you think about them and take your time, you can get again on this. They've got the square guttering, which you probably can't see. Guttering. I've started off filing out brass, square, and tube, and then I've worked out that you can actually get plastic shapes, the right shape and size. So I started using them. And eventually I actually stopped worrying about the channel, because unless you're close up, you can't see it. It's because you paint it black and you shove it right under the eave. So it's actually virtually invisible anyway. So you can make just to make life simpler. I often don't bother with a channel at all unless it's side on. It's basically if the building's side on and you're looking down the guttering, you want to see a channel, but otherwise you can't see it. So I don't do that anymore. Right. What I want to make I'll show you this anyway. Before I describe what I'm doing. This is a project I'm on with at the moment. It's basically a timber station building based on Ribble Tees. No, was it Teesdale? Teesside, not Teesside. Oh, it's gone. Brain fog. But anyway, it's a northeastern railway building. But when I'm doing an interior, I tend to do them like that. So they take a surprising amount of time as an interior like that. Somebody buying a ticket. Again, more posters on the back wall, bits and pieces, and then slot them in from behind. This I've actually, because the wood was slightly warped, I put a track there and I just slightly it in so it holds it in. And it's a bit fiddly. In fact, it's going to be a lot fiddly today because I'm showing it to someone. And that locks into place nicely. The thing with, I tend to have a very theatrical attitude to buildings. Nobody's ever going to see that, so there's no point in modeling it. So if I ever want to take the inside out for any reason and just pull it straight out without any trouble and repair it. Where have I put them? Roofs for buildings. For small buildings, it's fairly straightforward. You can get a pizza card and just bend it like that, and you can get a roof whichever pitch you want. For larger buildings, trusses are useful, and that's a 40 degree. It's just a bit of plastic card, and that's 1mm ply for the bracing and some fine, couple of millimeter square timber. The beauty of wood and plastic is you can glue them with any PVA based adhesive and it won't stick to the plastic, so you can assemble and hopefully get it out.
And it doesn't stick to the plastic.
And it comes out and you've got a roof truss. And of course, once you've made one, you can make half a dozen and they're all going to be the same size for your roof. So I've also got a 30 degree one, the same sort of thing. You're unlikely to get a roof lower than 30 degrees. You will go up to maybe 50 degrees for a thatched roof. 40 degrees is fairly common. So 30 degrees is more like for a stone roof if you're doing the stone slabs on a roof rather than slates. Talking of slates, my slates. Basically, it's a grid done on the computer, printed onto thick grey paper. They're then cut into strips. I don't think I've got any strips handy. Just I'll get us. Oh, ooh. Cut into strips. So you've got 2 strips like that. I'd then take a scalpel and cut the bottom verticals, in this case, down. Maybe just give the odd one a little bit wider, but not too much, because unless a slate's in very poor condition, they tend to be very even and they last very well. It's unusual to find an occupied dwelling with wonky slates. You might have the odd one that's come off because of the weather, but then they get repaired. And once that's been slit, just literally place them on top of that one on top of that, and keep going ad infinitum up the wall.
Lift it up a bit, John. That's it, we can see it now.
Yeah, that's it. So you're just doing one on top of the other. The idea of that is you do actually get us, if you do them halfway, I mean, real slate should actually do 2/3, but that's takes more slates. So yeah, and just wander up the roof, measure straight lines on your roof and line them up. Off you go. The thing I would say is paste the whole strip. Don't leave a bit at the bottom where because what will happen, they'll curl and you'll end up with a slate stuck up, and it will actually, you know, and it just doesn't look. Slates lay flat. They are, you know, they're a precision roof is a slate roof, and it doesn't look right if you make it too scruffy. I haven't actually got an actual slate roof, but they're, again, that's dead easy to make. It's just time and patience really, and drawing out your roof. Right. Right. I'll come back to this building because this is completely different to everything I've been talking about. This is actually made with what they call Paylite. It's a expanded PVC or foamed PVC. It comes in relatively large sheets. It is basically PVC, but it's what they call foamed. You can buy it in 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter, and I think 3 and 5 millimeters. But anything above 2 is too awkward to cut accurately. And the only place I know you can get it is 4D model making materials, which is you've got a good mail order based in London, and they make it. What you can do with it, as you can probably see, it scores nicely. I'll try the other light again, see if that helps. Get the score in. No, it's not. No, there you are. You can see how it's got.
How are you spelling K-light?
It's Paylite, P-A light. So that's what I used. So you use something like, what's it got, like that, to actually mark, to do your spacing, and then a simple scriber and a ruler, and you can score into it to create planking. It's a bit softer than plasticard, but it's very nice to work with. You can paint it if you spray it with a primer. You can buy a can of plastic primer for use for cars, which is fine, or even an ordinary grey primer will do. It's more stable than ordinary card. It's waterproof. As you can see, it stands up very square, whereas a piece of card on the same thing would have bent over. It's as easy to cut as card, although it does seem to blunt blades quite quickly. It's stronger than card, but not as hard as plasticard, but I think it's more stable than plasticard. The only real disadvantage is you can only stick it with super glue, which doesn't give you a lot of wiggle time. You've more or less got to get things into place, and if you look at the front, you can see how it's got these little strips. You've got to get your glue. This is where this tool comes in. You can get the glue to where you want it and just snap it into place. But you have got to make sure you cut it to the right size and it goes in. I mean, that's a bit of plastic angle. They're just plastic strips. And that's, and the same around the door frame. That's plastic.
Philip Taylor's telling us that you get Pay-Lite from sign shops in large sheets.
You can, but they tend to do it thick. It's getting the 1 mil and the 2 mil sheets.
Is that a 2 mil sheet you got on that building?
That the front is 1 mil. That's actually that's 1 mil. That's two. It's actually one thickness. Oh no, it is actually. It is. It depends on where you are. It's up to 2 thicknesses of 2 mil.
Right.
So it's because of the way I've built it. I've made it the side walls. You can see are a bit thicker. But that the front wall, which will actually get some extra reinforcing. In fact,
again, while I've been looking on the internet, it's £1.95 for the 1 mil and £2.40 for the 2 mil, and they are 301 by 603 millimeters sheets.
Yeah, quite reasonable compared to say plastic card or even ordinary card. It's what are we going to say? That again is I've actually put. You can see how it's got a truss fitted to it already as well for the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the inside of it. That's again, it's basically these are the 2 end bits. And again, it's got an interior. That's the gents' first class waiting room, which again slots in. Now, this is one area where I've succumbed to laser printing. When I can find it, I had it here. Middleton in Teesdale, that's what it is. And that's the front veranda. And I've got somebody to that was actually done in 2 pieces, which are then overlaid and stuck together. And that will go like so.
Is that your model making?
No, that's a friend of mine made it for me, shall we say. I drew it to scale. It's in Ken Hoole's book is the actual picture. So I've used that and drew it to scale, and she's cut it out for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's rather nice. And she's done some windows as well to match the originals, which I've got somewhere.
Just as an aside for people who are going to decide to draw things up.
Sorry?
Just as an aside for people who are going to draw things up for laser cutting, what you have to remember is that the actual laser has a diameter, like a milling machine, as it were, and very often it's 1.5 millimeters. So you've got to allow 0.75 millimeters for the cut.
I think it probably depends on your machine. Looking at this, I mean, that's the inside of it. It's very fine. I mean, they're probably those window frames are probably only 0.5 mil wide, thick.
Yeah, what I'm meaning is that whoever's machined it for you has taken your drawings, converted it into CAD, and then had to make an allowance for the thickness of the laser.
But that is basically done. I did a drawing, I think. Still got. Yeah, that's the CAD drawing she did, which she got to me to check. See, it's got all the various bits on it. Because there's a roof as well. So there's 2 parts for the wall and the roof. So, which is basically what I drew, but obviously put on, scanned onto the computer and adjusted to get it all the same.
Yes.
That's
James has just said that the laser that they use has got a 0.3 millimeter. You say 0.3 millimeter or 3 millimeter laser? Sorry, James, you're muted.
No, I meant 0.3, so it's very tiny.
Yes,
All
I
right.
can see.
So we have to offset the laser beam. If we're doing a window, cutting out a window, we make that 0.15 millimeters smaller all the way around. And if
Yes.
you're doing an outside, it's 0.15 millimeters bigger,
Yeah,
as the laser beam goes down the line you draw. So the line has infinite, it's infinitesimally small in theory, but of course the laser cuts both sides of it.
yeah.
But no, it's 0.3 millimeters, so it is very small. Most of the time it doesn't make any difference, but occasionally if you're doing windows with small sort of frames
They're quite
like
small.
that, then you do need
Yes.
to take it into account, because they can just disappear.
Yep. And she's also made some windows. That's just a test one, which is on acetate, which is why it's all fogged up. But you can see how they, which
It's
again
looking
match
brilliant.
the
Yeah,
original
nice.
windows, which was very nice. A little thing which obviously there's a clock in the middle, or there should be a clock in the middle of there. I discovered looking on eBay that you can get watch glasses for not very much. I can't remember, it's quite cheap. This is a domed one. You can get flat ones as well in lots of different sizes. So you can fit a glass in front of your clock. Oh, yeah, I will be fitting a glass in front of the clock. Can you see that really there?
Yes, I think we've got the idea there.
Yeah.
Watch glasses.
Just watch glass. Yeah, it's just a watch glass. And they come in a vast range of sizes, and as I say, they're not very expensive. I think the postage was as much as the cost of the thing itself.
Yes.
Right. Unless people have got questions, I think. Oh, still got some.
We've got some slides to go yet.
We have, yeah. Might as well go through the rest of the slides and see what we've got.
Just bear with me, and we'll get there. And we looked at that one.
Yeah, we looked at that one.
Come on. Oh, I do apologize. Maybe the computers run out of steam. I'll stop that share and try to do it a different way.
Yeah.
We should
do that one.
this
Yeah,
one
yeah.
next.
That one, yeah. We've already seen the Cribble, the grocers. The building next to it are actually the two. No, that's back again.
Try again.
That's it. Right, these are slight interlopers here, because the two buildings with a timber frame, I had some timber boarding to use up, and it was rather than I thought a timber frame building who just had a bit of variety as well. So, and they're actually two buildings that I found. Oh.
With a timber frame, I don't see that on this picture.
Sorry, timber cladding. Sorry, my fault.
Right.
They were in the Guillory book. So small house in 18th century London, and they're actually on. Well, where were they? I won't be able to find them now. I should have marked them.
I can see somebody's.
They were on Bermondsey Street, anyway, in London.
I can see somebody's got a question, but I can't read the question while I'm screen sharing. James, can you help?
That was me. A question for James. Can you adjust the diameter of the laser beam on a laser cutter?
I can't think of a way of doing it. What happens is that the the laser beam starts off in the laser itself at around 3 millimeters on our machine.
Is this a subject you're going to be discussing in January?
No, it isn't.
Oh, right, sorry.
So I'll carry on. What happens is that the laser beam comes out of the laser itself at about 3 millimeters diameter. It then hits a couple of mirrors, and then it comes to the laser head, which is a prism. It's then diverted from a horizontal into a vertical, and it's then passed through a focusing lens. So at that point, it is then focused down to a point, but that point cannot be of 0 diameter, and that's where you've got the 0.3 approximately. But of course, within a fairly short distance of around 50 millimeters, it goes from 3 millimeters diameter down to 0.3. So in fact, the laser beam that cuts through your material is tapered.
Right.
Okay. If you move the material higher up that taper, you will get a wider beam. You'll get a wider cut.
Right.
And if you move it below the focusing point, the beam will open up again. It'll come down to a point, and then it'll start to get bigger again. So again, you'll get a wider cut. So the idea is that you put your material, the top of your material, at the point at which the beam is the smallest, and then you get the focused energy and the cleanest cut. But the cut you get through the material does have a tapered edge to it, and you'll find that, John, on your laser cut parts.
Yeah.
Thin enough material, you almost certainly won't notice. But if you're cutting 5 millimeters thick material, it shows up.
Yeah, it's very noticeable. I also work in 3 mil scale, and we've had laser cut sleepers.
Right.
If you turn the sleeper over, it's very noticeable that it's wider on one side than it is on the other.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And there's not a lot you can do about that.
No.
It's in the nature of the way the laser beam is created.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, James.
Okay, thanks for that.
Sure, you're welcome.
John,
Right.
back to you.
As I was saying, that the timber clad buildings are two interlopers in that they're actually from Bermondsey in London. The names are fictitious. One's Lewis is my wife's father's name, and you all know Charles Oldroyd, the rag and bone man. He did want to know why he couldn't have a fine antiques shop, but although the rag and bone
trumpet.
the posters are actually copied from the ones on the original shot. You could actually read those. So they are actually the posters, the rag and bone posters and things are actually relatively authentic. The big building next to it, is an old, I think it's Bethel Methodist Church in Leeds. Although by the turn of the last century, it had been converted into a general manufacturing centre, and the names on there are the names that are on the buildings. So Ward, Whiteley and Wills and Co. all had businesses in that building at that time.
Excellent.
Yeah. Right, so if we can go to the next one.
Hey, it worked that time.
Yeah. Right, this is just where you can see the church again, looking down. What I would want to say about these, if you notice, there's Foston Mills, and behind that is actually the end board, and where the rails end. And on both of those, I've actually used flats. And because, particularly the second one, but even the first one at the front, you can't actually see them very well. So I've used purple bob card kits cut about and mismatched and given a light misting to dull, particularly the back one. The flour and corn mill, and just give that a light spray of a mist of white paint to dull it down, and they just fill those gaps in. Particularly again, the one at the back the one that's in the middle of the picture. When the photographs were taken for the railway modeler, that building wasn't there, and the gap looked awful on the photographs. Admittedly, you can hardly see it unless you stood right at the far end of the layout. But as I often stand there when I'm operating, it annoyed me, so I filled it with a building which is just a flat quite cheap really, but they're quite good value of the purple bob things, worth looking at.
You have a problem with fading of colours on the card?
I haven't had so far, and I do keep it covered when it's not in use though, because we've got lights in the ceiling. We're right on the top floor of an old mill, and there's quite a lot of light comes in from the windows in the roof. So I do tend to keep it covered in black polythene when it's not actually operating, because again the notices fade as well, and I suspect the card kits might fade if they were kept under a bright sunlight. Yeah, right. I
take it there's a bit of brick walling missing.
Yes, again, that's the baseboard joint.
You have a little piece to slot in there.
There is a piece that slots in there. I hadn't realised it was missing when I took the photograph. It's one of those things.
Are your worst enemy, aren't they?
Yeah.
That and picky railway modelers.
Yeah. I mean, for those that might remember Foston Mills, that's the building right in where the chimney is. Underneath the chimney, you can see there's a building with Foston Mills on the gable end, and then another building coming forward from that. They were originally built for the Foston Mills layout. There was a layout previous to this, and they were never used on that layout. So they ended up on here, which was a nice, easy way of saving it, filling the space, and yeah, saving time.
Saving building time. Yes.
Yeah, it keeps the buildings going. Right, I think there's one more. See what we've got next. Ah, yeah, you can just see the purple bob building there in between the two larger buildings. The big building is actually based on Poole paper mill, very, very much reduced. I actually measured it up, and it would have taken up half the layout. So I've used the basic style, but then reduced it. So it's still quite a big building in relation to the layout, but a lot smaller. And RF Brent & Co Limited did actually make incandescent mantles on the banks of the River Tynes. So although the building's just a generic one, the actual title for it is correct. Coal drops are based on those at Alston, and fairly straightforward. A couple of northeastern wagons. Yeah, I think that's. Is that the last picture? I'm not sure where. I think that's the last picture, isn't it? Yeah. Oh. Right. Have anybody got any questions?
If anybody's got any questions, don't hesitate. There are some in chat, but while I'm sharing the screen, I can't see them. So it's over to James.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
How is the lighting lit? Is that lighting we see in that picture from lights on the layout?
There is lights on the layout. I've got LEDs across the front of the layout, but as I say, because the layout's in the club and it's got good natural lighting, I suspect that's rather strong sunlight.
Oh, right.
That's lighting that.
There is a question from Alex about the buildings on your layout. Do you use paint? That question hasn't been asked before, has it?
Paints. I tend to start with Umbral enamels because they dry fairly hard, and I usually start with for brickwork. I'd start with an orange colour. I'd then apply mortar, depending on whatever colour that is, and then work over darker shades, and sometimes even down to painting individual bricks. So they do vary. I mean, as you can see, there's two different style of brick there. They do, but the basically, I'd start with an orangey colour, and then build it up with darker colours, and put the mortar in at some stage. Again, that can vary. You can put it in later or earlier, depending on how you're doing it. The thing with mortar is it often stains onto the brick. So whichever colour you use, you're going to have to work out how much of it you want to stay there, how much you want to wipe off, and what you can cover it with if it stays. But it's trial and error, really. The best thing is just to have a go. But I usually, once I've got the first couple of coats on, and often spray it on, then I'll start to use the Vallejo, I think it's Vallejo how you pronounce it, acrylics, which are softer, but and of course, because they're acrylic, they dry faster, so you're not waiting for it to dry. Because obviously when you start, you're spraying a sheet, as you start to cut it down, you can move faster with smaller amounts of paint.
Mhm.
I wondered if you'd ever tried using artist pencils like these.
I've got some. I've never really tried using them. I've never really found a use for them.
Oh, right, okay, because I've got a friend who often writes for MRJ, Tim Peacock, and the buildings he produces in 4mm, he always uses these artist pencils, which are they're sort of water. They will spread if you take your finger and spread the you sort of colour in, and it looks quite rough, and then you wet your finger and just spread your finger across the brickwork, and it spreads the red colour across the bricks. It's very effective.
I'm aware of them. I've never, and I've
tried
even
them.
got a set, but I've never actually got around to using them yet.
Fair enough.
John, when you're using foam board,
Sorry?
when you're using foam board, do
Yeah.
you ever strip one paper face off and emboss the foam core?
No, I never have. I've known of it being done, but I've not. I think because I think some of the older buildings on like Ravensbeck at Keighley were done with sugar board, which has a different texture to foam board. I'm not no, I haven't. I've not. I've looked at it as an option, but I've never actually wanted to do it.
I believe Murray's got a question. He's got his hands raised.
Yeah, John, the joints in your baseboard where the track joins up, how have you done that part of the track work?
Well, because most of it's covered in sets, it's fairly straightforward. I've just basically put a strip of copper clad underneath the rails and soldered them down, so there's fairly strong. But most of the track is copper clad anyway, so it is quite strong. I've also but basically I put it where the joint is, there'll be on either side will be a fat strip of copper clad to which the rails are soldered, and that provides quite a strong joint then, and it works. Quite simple.
Yeah.
It's just basically putting a copper sleeper there, and obviously if you're wiring it, then you need a gap.
So how do you make sure that the track work lines up? Have you got dowels or something in the baseboard?
Right. Yes, I've got, which I haven't actually got to hand. I'm not sure where they are at the moment. Some cabinet makers dowels. They're slightly different to pattern makers dowels. You get a little hole and a bullet thing that sort of slots into it, which are were quite accurate for normal things. And then, well, that's actually, I think I have three of those per baseboard joint, and just have clips to hold it together, and it works quite well.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
I think York Model Making, or was it something like not York Model Making? It's one of the baseboard companies sells them, and I think they call them cabinet makers dowels or something.
Station Road baseboards, I think.
That's the one. That's the one. Yeah, they sell them. And they're not terribly expensive, and it's basically just a circular bit that you drill a hole and push in. It's tight fit, and then you've got another bit which has got just plugs in, and then they lock quite accurately. And certainly with three of them to line your base, obviously you line your baseboards up first, clamp them together, and then lay the track. And I've not had any problems.
John Starling mentions that he struggled to add the York coins to Petite Properties churchwood glue. Sorry, Petite Properties church. Wood glue was used good for sticking the stone chips to the church. Alphatic glue, often used for other things like actual wood kits and bonding wood, leather and paper. Something I mentioned was alphatic glue earlier.
Right, yes. Yeah, I've actually got some, but I've not used it to stick in plastic, to be quite honest.
No, I haven't used it for sticking plastic, but I've certainly found it using for bonding wood to wood.
Oh yes, it's fine for this. Excellent.
And the time for it to bond is seconds rather than waiting hours for the PVA. to
Yes,
dry.
it's quite quick. And it does have a slight flexibility even when it's dried,
Yes.
I've
yeah.
found, which can be handy.
Whose that phone ringing?
It's all right, it's ours, it's been picked
All
up.
right. Anyway, John, have we got any more questions for John tonight? Because we're getting close to finishing time.
Yeah.
So if anybody's got any questions, Michael, you've got put your hand up. You want to unmute yourself? Michael, thank you.
It's not so much a question, John. It
Mhm.
relates to glazing the buildings. I've never actually produced buildings, but when I built carriages, what I've always done with those is make a sort of inner frame so that the glazing then slots in between the inner and outer frames. And
Yeah.
therefore you don't have to worry about how secure it is or it dropping out if somebody pushes it from outside.
You frightened him away now.
Yes, so I see, yeah. Yeah.
Think
Yeah,
you can just see the inner bit in there.
Yes, yeah.
You drop it
Yeah.
into there,
Yeah.
cut them to size, drop them in. That's a Poppy's coach that's nearly finished.
All right.
But yes, I found that works very well. Put an inner frame in and drop the glass down. Then it holds it all in place. Especially when you get the seating in, it's all held in place and doesn't need
That's
a lot
right.
of gluing.
That's right.
Yeah, talking about your Poppy's coach, Nigel did an excellent description of putting them together on the virtual show. And the virtual show is still running until the end of the month, so you can go and watch that as well. All right, then. Well, thank you very much for
It's over now.
presentation. I'm sure I can go.
I missed a lot then.
No.
Beg your pardon? Somebody there got another question? No?
No.
Right, I'll go back to screen sharing.
Yeah.
Because I want to, and if I can do this time. Here we go. And
It was very good.
we are getting there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, John, for
Yeah,
agreeing
no
to
problem.
talk about the
Enjoyed it.
buildings. The next session will be on the 26th of January. There isn't one on the 26th of December. For some reason, we have festivities at about that time. So it'll be the 26th of January when our co-host here, James Aitken, from the technical team, is going to come on and understand he's going to talk about 3D printing. Is that right, James?
That is correct. Yes, I've begun the process of working out exactly what I'm going to say and how I'm going to do it.
Absolutely super. So we'll look forward to seeing that. I don't know who your host is. I don't think I'm down for that. But it's somebody, maybe somebody that knows how to do it better than I do. Then in February, we've got Ian Allen, who's going to talk about Templot again. This is part 3. It's been 2 parts before. If you've missed them, it's a track designing program. They are on the Guild website, on the YouTube channel. So do have a look at those. And he's going to go into a little bit more detail. March, we're not sure exactly. We're waiting for confirmation. April, Peter Reynolds is going to talk about layout control. Again, May, we're awaiting confirmation. But in June, once more, Nick Dunhill is going to talk about scratch building, but this time about locomotive frames. If you've seen any of his other sessions, if you haven't done, then by all means, they're on the YouTube channel. Go and watch them. Again, July, we're awaiting confirmation, but in August, somebody called Tony Kell. That could be me. And Rennie Lord, my mate, I'm going to talk about the Selby Bridge layout. September, we're again waiting confirmation, but in October, Jakob Stachler from Elcock Creative is going to talk about laser cutting buildings. Then in November, St Neots Model Railway Club is going to talk about their Bowater layout. It's a layout that they've been building for the last couple of years during COVID. And I understand our esteemed chairman of events, Jackie Nishaw, has had a considerable input onto that as well. So it should be interesting. I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. I shall take that off. And if there's anybody got any final questions, anybody at all?
Yeah, Tony, it's Murray Bartlett.
Yeah, go ahead, Murray.
I just like to comment. I'm on the other side of the world, so for me this is in the morning, and these virtual shows are very valuable, and they make my the fees and the subs that I pay well worth the money, because prior to COVID and everything else, all we ever got, you know, being overseas, all we ever got was really the magazine, and this has just made the whole thing of belonging to the O-Gauge a lot better, and value for money it's one of the best, and I'd like to congratulate those who put this all together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, we do have a virtual show team, which includes, of course, James, who creates the web pages. Myself, I get hold of layouts from all over the world, and if anybody's got a layout, wants to go in the next virtual show next November, please do get in touch with me. I need plenty of layouts, don't I, John?
You do?
Because we had your layout this year. That's fantastic. Is there anybody else wants to switch their mic off? Switch the mic back on and ask any more questions, because this is your last opportunity.
Alex, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I do. Just for a last one before we wrap up. I'd like to say, John, thank you very much for this session. I've been thinking of doing some modelling, and I have a signal box by Metcalfe in Dublin, but I do have the idea from you, because I don't trust instructions.
Well, that's very kind.
Yeah.
Michael Holland seems to be waving his thumb at us.
All I was going to say, I think I am, I am unmuted. All I was going to say to Murray was, it's not only the people from across the other side of the world who benefit from these sessions. I think we all do, and I certainly have.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed taking part in them and hosting them. I'm not so sure I'm going to enjoy it quite as much when I'm on the other side of the counter, but there we are. Well, anyway, thank you all for joining us, and don't forget to join again on the 26th of January, and for the life of me I can't remember what day that is, but 26th of January, James Aitken, the star of the show.
Three.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everybody from all over the world.
Thank you.
Thanks, goodbye.
Bye now.
Cheers.
Bye.